Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We have some pretty breaking news. U.S. Special Operations Command picks Anduril Technologies to lead counter-drone interrogation work in a $1 billion deal. Now, what does this have to do with Palantir? Palantir supplies a lot of the software that this hardware manufacturer, Anduril Technologies, creates for the U.S. Special Operations and for the government writ large. We're going to read a little bit off this press release, and then we're going to get to how this actually relates to Palantir. Bottom line thesis, a company that Palantir provides the integral software, essentially the backbone of how they create the hardware, just secured a $1 billion deal. Now, why do you get $1 billion? It's not just because you're the best company in the world. It's because all the facets that go into making you the best company in the world to get that $1 billion. And software tends to play a pretty big role for you to be able to get those $1 billion. And if that software is provided by none other than Palantir, well, then that's a pretty big thing. So let's get into the press release. U.S. Special Operations Command has picked California-based Anduril Industries to lead its counter-drone systems interrogation work in a $1 billion deal. The Lattice system is able to provide autonomous detection, clarification, and tracking of targets at the edge of the battlefield and alerts users to the detected threats. It also prompts users with solutions to engage and destroy the threats the company described. So obviously, this is a major defense contract for a major defense company that's going to be helping the United States when it gets into wars or when it gets into combat with other adversaries. Now, the stuff that's going on in Russia and the Ukraine, like, it's not that there's going to be a war that's going to happen, but it sort of lets you realize that the world is kind of crazy. And because the world is kind of crazy, there is likely a world in which we are going to be more in combat than not in combat, just based upon the nature and the history of the United States. Now, I don't want that to happen, but the fact that we have these systems in place and the fact that we have these things ready to go, if it were to happen, to be able to keep us as safe as possible, that's a big deal. As the SIP, Anduril will maintain continuous system updates, develop and deploy new capability, and integrate best-in-class third-party sensors and effectors, future-proofing deployed systems at an additional no cost to the customer. Now, this is primarily based because a lot of the sensors they create and a lot of the technology they create is based on IoT. Palantir is very big on IoT. IoT is the Internet of Things. I did a whole analysis of what the Internet of Things really is for people who want a basic beginner level approach to it. I'll put that in the description. And essentially, it's, like Siri, your Amazon Alexa. These are IoT devices. An electric car that is able to be autonomous. These are devices that have sensors within them that don't need to constantly be connected to the internet and that are still able to give you updates and be able to communicate with you as an individual because of the third-party sensors and machine learning and artificial intelligence that is powering how those devices ultimately communicate to users. Now, let's talk about Anduril Industries and Palantir Technologies, because Palantir specializes in IoT. Palantir specializes in a lot of the data analytics software that is necessary to create these counter-drone systems from a software and a hardware perspective when we're talking about IoT. Anduril Industries has received a subcontract award from Palantir Technologies for the hardware system design for the U.S. Army's Tactical Intelligence Targeting Access Node, or TITAN, prototype effort. During the first phase of the effort, Anduril will collaborate with Palantir and serve as the lead hardware systems architect. Anduril will be responsible for the design, development, testing, and delivery of the physical infrastructure of the TITAN prototype. A software-centric approach is critical to the development of the correct hardware platform, and Anduril will emphasize modularity, manageability, and performance. Andurил's extensive experience deploying and updating software on organic hardware systems in remote environments with limited support capability, that's where we get the IoT stuff, will play a significant role in the design and development of the physical infrastructure solution. So, first of all, that's already a pretty big deal to analyze there. Palantir selected, or Anduril Industries joined Palantir's technologies for creating this ultimate TITAN product. This TITAN product is a tactical intelligence targeting node, meaning an ability to target or recognize when targets are approaching in the most intelligent of ways. There's a lot of edge AI and software that is involved in order to make sure that the hardware that is being used to detect that stuff or target that stuff is actually happening in its place. Palantir and Anduril are collaborating on this, which is a really good thing for Anduril getting a $1 billion contract, because if Palantir's technologies and their software are powering a lot of the way that they're able to do that, that means that Palantir's software is good. That means that they have a lot of leverage with the DoD, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Chris, if you're watching this, shout out to you. Chris Patel, I did a podcast with him. He's a healthcare IT expert. He's very knowledgeable about Palantir. I wanted to get a little bit more analysis about this deal, so I was texting him, and here's what he said. He said, "I'd say it's more of a confirmation that Palantir is slowly forming the backbone of the Defense Department. More contracts that integrate with Palantir, the more Palantir can demand in future contract renewals because of the higher level of dependence." So what he's saying there is like, okay, if Anduril Technologies is getting a $1 billion deal, and the only reason they're getting that $1 billion deal, not the only reason, but like one of the fundamental reasons they're getting a $1 billion deal is because their technology is good. The tech is good. The software makes sense. The device can give advanced recommendations because it has the software powering it to be able to do that. The government knows that that's happening from Palantir. right? Palantir was not going to get this $1 billion contract because Palantir doesn't necessarily specialize in what Anduril Industries specializes in. But the fact that Palantir has the ability to have the leverage to say, okay, the only reason they got it is because we were providing the software, gives them the ability to simply negotiate better deals. Later today, I'm coming out with a valuation model for Palantir. And I did this valuation model, or I had someone do this valuation model for me. He's an investment banker. His name is Sebastian. It's an hour and a half, and it's the most comprehensive valuation model I have ever seen from a numerical perspective to understand Palantir. One of the things I asked Sebastian in that call was like, does Palantir need the government? And his argument was, look, they need commercial to scale in order to become like a multi-$100 billion, trillion-dollar company, right? Like commercial sector is really what's going to get them to be integrated and to get those high multiples that Wall Street and investors generally like to give to high growth tech companies. But his main argument, one of his main arguments was like, people are overlooking the government. He was like, the government could be a really big indicator, right? Like Palantir can get leverage and charge and just say like, hey, we want $1 billion now because like we're integrated in you, and like the government might have that leverage. It's not the reason Palantir will become like the most successful company in the world, but these government deals are very, very lucrative, and it's pretty much nothing for Palantir in terms of a sales and marketing expense because they already have a 17-year relationship with the government. And if they already have all these relationships with subcontractors that work with the government and the DoD, then it's a really good possibility for Palantir to get more. He also says, remember, Palantir is trying to become the operating system of the DoD. In order for that to happen, you need to be able to develop close partnerships with all other major defense contractors. Anduril and Palantir's close ties only leads to the validation that Palantir is the preferred choice. And that's another really good point that Chris brought up that I thought was phenomenal. So when you talk about Palantir as like the modern operating system for the enterprise, if you think of yourself as a consumer, Windows and Mac is your operating system, right? So when you are using Mac and you're plugging in your USB, or you can't plug in your USB because Mac doesn't take USBs anymore, which is absolutely ridiculous, but you like transferring a document from an SD card or something, or a photo into your documents on the Mac, you're like seeing how that transaction happens. And it's easy because you're like, okay, I drag the photo, I put it here, this and that, then I open this to transfer the file, I do this to delete the trash. Like all of it makes sense because it's an operating system that is consumer friendly, whether it's Windows or Mac. Palantir is trying to become that operating system that integrates data, finance, marketing, sales, accounting, regular decisions that companies have to make, supply chain, logistics, all in one place as the modern operating system for an enterprise. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do because you've got a lot of stakeholders involved. And that's why it takes months and months for them to get contracts, even though when they do get a contract, it ends up being $7-8 million in revenue, because you've got to get C-suite executives, people who actually make decisions in the company, to agree that they want to integrate this software into the fabric and infrastructure of their organization. Palantir, on top of trying to be able to do that for the enterprise, is trying to be able to do that for the government. And when you're trying to be able to do that for the government, it is a very, very difficult task, because if you're able to do that for the government, you are able to develop really, really close relationships with some of the biggest industries that exist in the government, the Department of Justice, the DoD, et cetera, et cetera. Palantir is trying to do the exact same thing that Windows or Mac does for the government, particularly for the DoD. And the reason for this is because the Department of Defense really has unlimited amounts of money. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans just passed a $787 billion spending plan for the DoD, for defense spending. And the reason for this is because, Democrats and Republicans hate everything, but they can at least agree on one thing, which is that we need to keep America safe. As a result, the military, the army, usually always has an unlimited spending budget because, no Democrat or Republican wants to be seen as voting against keeping the government safe. So if that's the case, you've got hundreds of billions of dollars going to the Department of Defense, and, it's not like they have to spend all of it. They're not just throwing it left and right. But if they find partners that they have close relationships with, that they can work with in a meaningful way, and they're able to really integrate into the fabric of how the DoD does defense, then there is a world in which that partner can have very, very lucrative deals going into the future. So if Palantir is able to become the operating system for the DoD, then 2-3 years from now, the DoD is not going to be able to get rid of them, right? It's just a question of like business leverage, right? Like, if are you going to cancel your Windows? Are you if you've been using Windows your whole life and go to a Mac? Probably not, right? Because you're integrated with Windows. So like, if Windows was to charge you an extra $30-40, it's like you would pay that because it's like it just makes your life more efficient and effective. If Palantir is able to integrate so heavily into the Department of Defense by securing the types of partnerships with other defense contractors that they have been able to do with Anduril Industries, and Anduril Industries is getting $1 billion from the government. The kid is not my son, and I don't like Billie Jean, but if Anduril is getting $1 billion from the government, then that $1 billion is only based upon the technology that Anduril is offering, the value proposition that Anduril is offering. Well, the value proposition, 50% of it is coming from Palantir. 50% is arbitrary, but the number, the ultimate value for their hardware making sense is based upon the software that is integrated into the hardware, which is explicitly coming from Palantir. Which means if that's the case, Palantir having more and more close relationships to defense contractors, because Palantir is not going to get every deal in the world. They don't specialize in every deal in the world. But being the backbone of a lot of the infrastructure of those deals means eventually they could be the backbone of the infrastructure for the entire DoD. Because at that point, the DoD is not only developing close relationships with these other subcontractors that have close relationships that are integrated with Palantir, the DoD is implicitly and explicitly having a close relationship with Palantir because all of their technologies are integrated into every other subcontractor that the DoD is working with. And that ultimately means that the operating system for the Department of Defense, for defense spending, for counterterrorism, for all of these critical complex things that require a lot of data analysis, a lot of edge AI, a lot of IoT, a lot of stuff that, it's very hard to get skilled in, would be coming from Palantir, which means the lucrativeness of those contracts would also be substantial for Palantir. Overall, those are my thoughts. Anduril Industries gets $1 billion from the Department of Defense. Palantir is one of the integral forces that allows Anduril Industries to become what it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think this means for Palantir. Looking forward to reading the comments. My name is Mitt. I'll see you in the next one. And valuation model for Palantir coming tonight. Trust me, this is going to be one of the most comprehensive numerical analysis you see of Palantir ever. You're going to enjoy it. I'll see you in the next one.